So in my recent video about how to use an EQ pedal to make your Strat sound the way you want it to sound, I got a comment, "Silly Billy, make a video lesson about just using the Strat's Tone 1 and Tone 2 controls to get fatter, thicker, and warmer tones, just plugging directly into an amplifier and adjusting the amplifier's EQ settings." As I explained on the video, there's no tone knob for a bridge pickup on a Strat unless you have some kind of alternative wiring. So that means the only pickup where you really have to roll off some highs, you have no knob to do it. It would be better if this tone knob did these two pickups and this bottom tone knob did just the bridge pickup. And a lot of guys will wire their Stratocasters that way. But we will talk about how to fix your Strat's tone using your amp's tone stack, or for that matter, your Kemper Profiles tone stack, instead of an EQ block or EQ pedal, the way I talked about in my other video. Now, the whole problem I was trying to solve was that everything I have is set up for a Les Paul. So that's my starting point. But I wanted to switch to a Stratocaster without having to change everything. And that's why I used an EQ block in the beginning of the signal chain, just to make the first input close enough to the Les Paul that all my other settings and signal chain would function the same way. Now for a Silver Sky, I'm using 5.2 decibels at 500 hertz, 3 decibels at 125 hertz, 1.5 decibels at 1000 hertz, and 3 decibels at 2000 hertz. It would be different if I had different bands. This is on a graphic EQ on the Kemper. So without the EQ, it might sound a little thin. But if I add this EQ, it's got some meat on the bones. But forget that EQ. What if we wanted to fix it in the tone stack of our amplifier? Now this is a Kemper profile. We have to address something right out of the gate. So if I just start turning knobs on a Kemper profile that's not a liquid profile, it's not really the thing. Traditional Kemper profiles have a generic EQ. Bass, middle, treble, presence. They don't really correspond to what a presence knob or a bass knob or a treble knob are going to do in an amp circuit. These are actually just another EQ per se, not a tone stack. But I made a retrofit of this profile into a liquid profile. And I was able to do that because this is based on a Friedman IRX, which is close enough to the bright channel of a Plexi. So if you look at the amp parameters, amp model, Mars Plex Bright, that's a Marshall Plexi bright channel. I had the bright cap off on the IRX, so I set that to off. Now, a liquid profile gives you a real tone stack of the amp that it's supposed to be modeling. In this case, a Marshall Plexi bass, middle, treble, along with a presence. Now, the IRX doesn't have a presence knob. It does have this dumb presence toggle in the computer software. I leave that in the middle, so I'm guessing that would be like presence knob on 5. And I chose this profile for the demo because it just so happens I had the bass, middle, and treble dimed. So I just put them on 10 right here. Now, if I bring this bass knob down, since it's a liquid profile, it's not gonna bring down some generic band of frequency the way that the Kemper generic EQ would. It's gonna simulate what the bass knob would do on a Marshall Plexi. And on a real amp like this one, most of what these EQ knobs do is roll off whatever they're supposed to be rolling off. They're not adding anything. If I have a bass knob on 5, for instance, and I turn it up, I'm not adding more bass. I'm cutting less bass. All tone knobs are cuts, essentially. So 10, 10, 10 on the bass, middle, and treble would be like the tone stack is doing as little as possible. It's as close as it could be to being bypassed. Now let's record a loop of our reference tone. This is with the EQ engaged, and this is with the tone stack exactly how I had it. I haven't made any changes yet. This is with the neck pickup. Now let's play it without my EQ block and start turning some knobs to try to bridge the gap. So it's thinner, but I can't add more bass because the bass is already at 10. But what can I do? I can increase gain. Now this gain, and because it's a liquid profile, The gain knob is not going to do what a generic Kemper gain knob would do, which is not much. I don't like to mess with it. This gain knob, because it's a liquid profile, will simulate increased gain on a Marshall Plexi Bright channel, which is close enough to our Friedman IRX preamp. So let me just bring the gain up. So I can't bring bass up, so I'm bringing everything up, and then I'll bring down the mids and trebles to compensate. Let's listen to our reference tone. I'm going to come up a lot because it still sounds very thin. Now I'm hearing the same amount of bass as on this. Now I can bring down treble and mids to compensate. Let me just bring down the treble. I'm going to go with big movements. I have found when you're seasoning to taste, go big, make a big increment, making sure it's big enough to hear it, and then you just make smaller increments as you fine tune. Don't start going from 10 to 8, go from 10 to 5 and see where you're at. Reference tone. Wow, that's dark. I think I can bring some treble back in. So I know 10's too high, I know 5 is too low, so I'm going somewhere in the middle. I'm just picking 7. Reference tone. Still seems bright. Come down to 6. Reference tone. I think we're there. So I didn't really have to touch the mids knob, which means if I had this Silver Sky wired for a tone knob for the bridge, I could have used that. I could have increased the gain to compensate for rolling off the bridge. Remember also, we needed more gain to mimic our EQ because the EQ was boosting certain bands without compensating by bringing the entire level down. So there's more signal with my EQ than without it. So I would have needed more gain either way. That's because the pickups in a Les Paul are hotter than the pickups in a Stratocaster. There's more signal there. So let's try this on another piece of gear. This is a Universal Audio Dream65. I'm gonna turn off the entire stack in the Kemper. I'm going to turn on an effects loop. That effects loop is basically running to the Dream and back. So the Kemper's not doing anything except letting us hear the Dream65. Now these are settings I use that would be equivalent to the profile we use. Both of those are the same basic tone of the 3 main tones I use. Now obviously the Dream65 is a model of a 65 Deluxe Reverb. Kemper profile was of an IRX, which is a Plexi kind of thing. Even though these 2 tones are kind of the same target tone, they're not going to be identical. They're going to have little quirks that are different, not only in the tone itself, but in the way that the gain reacts to input. So I have found in the Dream65, when I use the EQ with my Strat, it gets a little dirtier than it would if I was using that EQ with something else. So I'm going to record a loop of a reference tone through the Dream65 with the EQ on. Now let's hear it without the EQ. So it just sounds a little thin. When I did all my Dream65 videos, there was someone who commented that they used almost the same settings as me. They just increased the bass for a Stratocaster. Or maybe they were using a Stratocaster and they brought the bass down for a Les Paul or something like that. So let me just bring the bass up to 5. and see if that's all we need. Reference tone. It's not enough. I need more. Let me just bring that up. I'm going to dime it. Reference tone. Bass knob all the way up. I don't think that's good enough. I think I got to bring the treble down. That might be a little too much bass. We'll see when I bring the treble down if we need to back that bass off a little bit. But let me just bring the treble down to about 9 o'clock. Reference tone. Let's just turn the treble off. Treble is all the way down. Reference tone. Let me increase the gain. I went from about 9:30 to about 11 p.m. Maybe that was it. Let's hear our reference tone. I think we should back the bass off. I'm going to bring the bass to 3 o'clock. Reference tone. It's close, really close. This is still a little brighter than the regular settings with my EQ. Let me bring down the gain. So from 11, we're going to go to about 10:30, but we're going to put the bass back up all the way. We might back it back off, but I'm going to put the bass back up all the way and bring the gain down to 10:30. The problem is our limitation. We can't turn the treble down below 0. There's a floor on how much of the brightness we can take out here. I could take it out with the tone knob, but I'm not doing that because I can't do that for every pickup. I could do it for this pickup because we're doing the neck pickup. Gain at 10:30, bass all the way back up. Here's our reference tone. That's close. Now we're just a touch darker. So I'm going to bring our bass knob down a little bit. 4:30. Reference tone. I could sit here for maybe another 20 minutes and just make these tiny, minute adjustments and but they're so close that I have to work a lot harder to get them closer and closer. It doesn't really matter. This isn't even a video about matching tones. We've done what we wanted to do. We wanted to make the Strat sound thicker, and we did it. We did it without an EQ block. We did it even without these knobs on the guitar. We did it only with our tone stack on our amp. One thing I want to mention before we move on, we were limited in the Dream65 because it was a 2-band EQ. How could we add or remove mids when there's only a bass and a treble knob? The answer is that you use those 2 knobs together with your gain knob as your mids. So you have to get there the back way, scooping out mids. Turning down the mids knob would be like turning up your bass and then treble, and then turning down your gain to compensate. Turning up your mids knob would be turning down your bass and treble, and then turning up your mids knob to compensate. I talked about that a little more when I did a playing demo of the Dream65, so you can click on that video if you'd like. So for our last demonstration, I'm going to be using a real tube amp, Monoprice Stage Right 15. I love this amp. It is, I think, the cheapest viable tube amp on earth. $300. Sometimes they blow them out for $150. I got mine used for $175, I think. The thing sounds pretty great, which is a testament to how great tube amps are, that the cheapest one that China could produce is pretty awesome. These are settings for this amp that would be an equivalent target, like I said, to what we did on the Dream65 and also on the Kemper profile. It's going to come out different than the others because this is just a different circuit than the Dream65 is based on or that my IRX profile is based on. It's also an actual guitar cab. So in the other demonstrations, we were running through a QSC speaker, a very great speaker. That's not exactly the same as getting it right from a guitar speaker. So here's our reference tone because I don't have a looper other than the Kemper. So we already know we need more bass. I'm just going to turn the bass up to 10 to see what it does. That helped. Now we need to bring down some treble. I could do it at the treble knob the way I did with the Kemper profile, or I could do it with this tone knob. That tone knob is kind of like the cut knob on a Vox AC30. I guess this would be more like a presence knob because up is brighter, whereas on a cut knob, down is brighter. Comment below if you know the difference between the cut knob on a Vox and any other presence knob, other than the fact that it's reversed, whether up is bright or down is bright. Let me just turn the treble all the way down and see what happens. That's close. I think that's a little too much. Let me put the treble at 1. It's still a little bright. Let me bring tone knob down to 1 to see what that does. I think that's probably it. It's hard without being able to go back to the reference. I'm going to turn the mids knob down just a little bit, down to 3.5, see what that does. Turning it back up to 5. I think we need a little more gain. 3.5. Putting tone and treble down to 0. It seems extreme, doesn't it? Tone or presence off, turning the treble off, leaving the mids in the middle. I don't understand mids knobs as much as I understand treble and bass knobs. Just so you know, I'm an electrician, and that's not the same as electronics, but it's adjacent. So I read the schematics of the amps. Whenever I get an amp or use gear, or even if I use a modeler, I research the circuit that the amp is based on. And I want to know like what the electrons are doing when that knob gets turned. Mids knobs are really hard for me to understand. I gotta hear the reference tone again. To get the reference tone, I have to put all these knobs back where they were. So let's just help me remember. We had the gain at 3, tone is at 0, bass at 10, middle at 5, treble at 0. So let me try to remember where I had this. Something like that, I think. It sounds the same to me, except I think I needed to turn the gain up more. Yeah. So gain back up. I'm going to go all the way up to 4.5 to see what it does. Tone on 0, bass all the way up, mids at 5, treble all the way down. You know why we're putting this gain way higher than I ever would under normal circumstances? Because we are cutting everything we can with tone, and we're cutting everything we can with treble, which means we're just reducing how hard this signal is hitting the preamp. I think our bass is too high. I'm bringing it down to 8. Still too high. 7. need to add back some high end. I don't know where to do it. Let's just try tone at 1, treble at 1, and see how we like it. This is close. I'm gonna need to check the reference tone again, but this is where we are. There's something high that I don't like. Tone knob at 0. Check the reference tone. Honestly, they don't sound alike, but I like what we have now better than what we were moving towards when I turned the tone and treble knob all the way down. Like this is the situation where I would just let the Stratocaster be the Stratocaster. I have enough gain. It sounds good to me. I like it. I don't want to bridge that gap all the way to make it sound like my Les Paul. I would be content to have a different sound this evening in this case. How would it sound on the bridge pickup though? Yeah, so the bridge pickup sounds thin. So I would at least need to add, let me turn the bass all the way back up. Yeah, it just wouldn't work. So that's where, yeah, this is close enough. It's hard for me to get all the way there without my looper pedal set up so that I can check the reference tone. If you want an explanation on how I use loopers, sometimes 2 loopers, to get a reference tone and a other tone and turn the knobs and really streamline this process, I made a video about that. You can click that right here, and that'll tell you how to do everything that you need to do with the gear you have, without having to unplug a guitar and turn all the knobs and do all that. This also shows you why I prefer to have one EQ block or pedal that I can put right in the front of the signal chain. It's essentially just an extension of the guitar, and that makes all my other settings usable on the Stratocaster. I'd be pulling my hair out if I had to do all this stuff every single time I changed a guitar or changed something else. I just want a button to push, and my whole rig will run the same way when I change one element of it. So go check out that Strat EQ video if you want to see that trick in detail, including all the settings that I used and the road that I took to get to those settings.